Okay, great. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here nice and early on Expo Day to join us and talk a little bit about self-publishing. My name is Steve Porter, and among other things, I'm the president of the association here that sponsors this event. And as you see, there are a lot of authors here today, eager to meet you and talk with folks. I also, along with my wife Dawn, we own and operate Stillwater Books, which is a retail bookstore in downtown Pawtucket. And we are also the owners of Stillwater River Publications, which is a hybrid publishing company that includes, right now we've done about 250 titles over the last 5 years from authors all over the country. I think most recently we've signed authors in Port Lyons, Alaska, and Kissimmee, Florida, and Houston, Texas. And we've also recently gone international, where we have now an author from South Korea, and we've had an author from China, and one now in New Zealand. So we're very happy whenever we have the opportunity to talk a little bit about self-publishing. I do a number of different topics and presentations. And what I wanted to do today was to kind of address some of the myths in self-publishing. One of the problems in the publishing industry is that there is no place to go for all the good information. For the last 200 years, there's been a publishing model. And that publishing model basically says that a writer will write something, perhaps find an agent, sell that book to a publisher, and that publisher will then arrange its design, its editing, and its marketing, as well as its distribution to wholesalers and bookstores, and the author needs to do nothing more than write. And that narrative has been out there for many, many, many years. And about maybe 10, 15 years ago, with changes in technology, particularly changes with ebooks, where suddenly there was this whole new kind of book that had never existed before. And then changes with printing itself, with the advent of print-on-demand technology, where you no longer needed to fill your garage with books in order to publish something. You could now print them one at a time, very inexpensively. So as I thought about how to bring the presentation today into focus to something meaningful, I thought maybe if we talked about some of the myths in publishing and self-publishing, that might be a great way to go and help educate folks who might be considering publishing their book down that path. So and of course, at the end of the presentation, there'll be plenty of time for questions. We have an hour, but I'll never use the whole hour. So at the end, if there's any topic or subject that I don't address during the presentation, make a mental note of that, and certainly I can be happy to answer questions at the end. So the first myth I want to address is that self-publishing is nothing more than vanity publishing. You will hear this often if you start to research different ways to publish your own book. But understand who is saying it. Usually it's the traditional publishers that are saying that. And why would the traditional publishing companies, the Random Houses, the Simons, the Harpers, why would they be saying things like this? Partly it's because self-publishing has become a threat. That people are publishing books and writing books and selling books outside that 200-year-old structure that I was talking about a moment ago. Many years ago, there was something called vanity publishing, or at least that's what they called it. And if you're old enough to remember reading to certain magazines, and you get to the classifieds in the back, and it was, you can be a published author, call this phone number. And you would pay a lot of money, and they would print the book, fill up your garage, and then you would be basically the entire marketing team, because now you had to figure out how to get those books out of your garage and into bookstores. Back then, there really was no internet, there really was no technology other than you walking the books into a store somewhere and asking them to please sell it. So a lot of people have negative connotations when they think about vanity publishing. So trying to equate self-publishing with vanity publishing is probably an unfair thing to do. Self-publishing covers a lot of different topics. It's not just maybe the novelist who wants to get their first work out there somehow. But it's also people who are now publishing things like maybe their genealogical history. We've worked with a number of authors who have worked their entire life to collect their family histories, the photographs and the documents and all these other things, and they want to preserve that research, forever. That's not a book that's ever going to be on the New York Times bestsellers list. It's not a book that's ever going to be even selling beyond maybe a handful of copies. But it doesn't make the book any less valid. And it's certainly not a vanity project. So there are a lot of reasons why someone may want to self-publish. And equating them to vanity presses is never really fair. Because a lot of these books, and I will let you wander the floor here later, and you can tell me then that a lot of these books are excellent. And they're not vanity projects at all. Myth number 2. All you need to do is write something great. And the rest takes care of itself. This is a myth that's, again, been perpetuated through the traditional publishing world for many years. Because what traditional publishers want are great manuscripts. They want great writing. They want great submissions. But that's not the end of the road. And what the publishing industry wants when you submit to them in a traditional fashion is they want excellent manuscripts, but they want them to be marketable. They want them to be different, they want them to be unique, they want them to be excellent, but they want them to be like everything else. So you kind of are stuck in this quagmire of trying to figure out exactly what you want to write. And many authors are caught between writing from their heart and writing what they're driven to write, and then writing what is marketable, perhaps to an agent or publisher. I can think of many, many, many examples of authors who came to us knowing that the book they wrote doesn't fit in any particular genre. You may write romance, and romance is certainly a very popular topic in a very popular genre. There are many very successful romance authors out there. But the minute you try to write a romance/sci-fi novel with the traditional romantic elements and the traditional science fiction elements, you don't win over both markets. You lose both markets. Because people who want to read romance don't want to read about the science fiction stuff, and the people who want the science fiction stuff don't want that traditional romantic element. So you're stuck. So writing something great isn't the end of the road. A lot of it comes down to your expectations. When you first write that manuscript and you choose to have it published, either self-published or traditionally, what are your goals with that book? What do you want to achieve? The person who's writing it to essentially impress their mother versus the person who's writing it to be on the Ellen DeGeneres show is going to have very different paths. And it takes a lot of research and a lot of planning to be successful in the direction you're going. And if you're that author who wrote that genealogical book that I mentioned a moment ago, you'll probably be very happy the minute you give those copies to your family. And this book is therefore a success based on that criteria. Myth number 3. I wrote a book and my editor will fix all the errors for me. They won't. We are often given manuscripts, and we talk to writers all the time, and I guess they're caught up in the mythology of what good editors will really do for your book. A lot of editors will reject your manuscript if it's full of mistakes. And it really, the only thing that a good editor will look at when they look at your manuscript and they see lots of mistakes, is the first thing they're going to say is, wow, this clown is an amateur. We really don't want to deal with him. That's not the role of an editor. Editors are professional writers themselves in many cases. There's an actual skill to editing. And there are also different levels of editing. They come under different names, but most people might know them as a copy editor, let's say. A copy editor is going to be responsible for fixing maybe spelling, grammar, punctuation. And believe me, the greatest novelists and writers of all time have issues with certain spelling, grammar, and punctuation. And a good editor helps fix that. But not just someone who's good at English. We get a lot of manuscripts in where we say, okay, we'd like to refer this to an editor now, and they'll say, oh no, I get A's in college in English, I don't need an editor. Or my mother's a teacher and she read it over for me. Every manuscript, no matter who wrote it or how long it is, needs an editor. I mentioned copy editing, which traditionally takes care of all the punctuation, spelling, and whatnot. But there's also a class of editing which goes under different names, line editing, but I like to think of it as developmental. It's an editor that's going to work with you to develop the story, develop the characters, develop the scenes. Find those things in the story and the plot, maybe that could use some beefing up, some holes, some other fixes. Finding good developmental editors is a godsend. It's the most wonderful thing when you've got an editor that you can work with and trust and really enjoy. But what you can't do is give them a manuscript full of mistakes, or give them a manuscript that was done in one quick draft. It's lazy. I think one of the universal things that a successful author will tell you is that they have done 10, 15, 20 revisions to a single manuscript, and then get the editor involved, and then have it completely rewriting it again. It's a laborious task to get that manuscript perfect, to be in the books that you might see, on the shelves of your favorite bookstore. Myth number 4. Bookstores and libraries are just going to love my book. So if you go down the road of self-publishing and you choose to maybe go through KDP at Amazon or through Ingram Spark or one of the other companies that's out there, and now you walk into your local bookstore and say, hey, aren't you excited? Here's a great new novel that you should carry. And the bookstore just kind of shrugs its shoulders and says, why do we want to carry that? And you kind of scratch your head as you walk out thinking, why didn't they just embrace me? And the example I use often in these presentations is the woodworker, the carpenter, who cuts down a bunch of pine trees in his backyard and makes the most beautiful pine boards you've ever seen. Perfectly straight, perfectly clean, perfect in every way. And he throws them all in the back of his truck and takes them to Home Depot. It says, hey, could you move the Georgia Pacific stuff aside and put my stuff on the shelf? Well, after the Home Depot manager stops laughing at him, he's going to have to load all the stuff and take it home. And bookstores are no different. Again, the narrative of the bookstore is that we love books, and remember, I come from a place where we run a bookstore. And our bookstore carries over 200 books from local authors. But in order for me to carry your book, I have to push aside authors who I know will sell and replace them with books that I don't know if they're going to sell. So when an author for the first time walks into a bookstore and feels some resistance, they're sometimes kind of pushed back a little bit. Because really, what does a bookstore want to do? A bookstore wants to sell books. It needs people to come into the store and actually purchase things off the shelf. So a store is going to be looking at every book that comes in its store in that manner. The most difficult bookstores to get into are bookstores like Barnes & Noble, or the major chains. And there's a very complicated reason for that, part of which goes to the relationship that major publishers have with these bookstore chains. When you walk into a Barnes & Noble and you see the big table right in the front when you walk in, and you see books piled up on end caps, on bookcases all the way down, and special displays in all the corners, all that space was paid for by publishers. Not just the books, but they paid for this, have their space, that space, so their books and their displays will be on sale in every single Barnes & Noble, and every single first bookshelf, and every single space throughout the country. So as an independent author with one book, one novel, you're not going to crack that easily. However, there is a way around it. The way around that is to have people actually want your book. If a bookstore knows it can sell it, it will go out of its way to get it, Barnes & Noble included. A lot of new first-time authors will go into B&N with their books, and they'll be told, sorry, we can't take them. They're printed through maybe KDP, which is a division of Amazon, or we don't do that here, or you gotta go through our corporate office for permission. All that will change when their phone is ringing off the hook, trying to get copies of your book. So the solution to getting your book into the bookstores has more to do with how you're going to market and promote it than it does anything else. And libraries are very similar. Librarians love local authors, they love local writing, they'll have writers groups in each of your local libraries, almost all of them do. But again, you're coming into a store with a book. You're coming into a library with a book, and what a library is interested in. They're interested in traffic. They want their local people to come in and borrow books, use the library services. That's how they're measured and their success comes from. Does your book play into that? And one of the ways to get into libraries, I've always felt, is rather than just show up and say, here, put my book on your shelf, is to walk into these libraries and be able to say, I'd like to work with your writing groups. I'd like to maybe give a presentation on publishing or on writing or something I can do for your library. Libraries are nonprofits, essentially. They're not there to make money. They're there to service their community. So you have to become part of their mission and help service their community as well. And it's always interesting when you get that pushback from libraries, like you do from bookstores. When the association, I won't say which library it was, but a library contacted us and we did a series of presentations to our nonfiction authors. One of them was a cookbook author, one of them did craft books. Each of them did a presentation one night for the length of a week. So we did like 5 presentations each night. It was for local authors, local books, local presentations. They were all very well attended. And at the end of the presentations, we asked if the library would carry the books that they'd just been presenting on. The library said, well, why would we want to do that? These aren't published with real publishers. And the authors kind of stepped back a little bit and said, well, what's the difference? So, well, we have to have these approved. They have to have reviews. They have to be, so you can guarantee me that every book in this library you've read and approved. Because there is sometimes that stigma that we still have to overcome. So the secret is get your book known. Have people ask for it. Myth number 5. Traditional publishers do all the marketing for you. I run into a lot of writers who come to us looking to publish a book and they'll say, I've got this great manuscript, but you know what? I don't want to promote it, I don't want to market it, I just want to sit home and write, because that's what I like to do. I like to write things. So I'm going to sit home and write and let somebody else do all that marketing for me. And unfortunately, the traditional publishing world doesn't work that way. And a lot of people try to avoid the self-publishing world because they think they're going to have to do all the marketing. Well, that may be true, but you're going to have to do all the marketing in the traditional publishing world too. Now, that isn't to say that a Random House or a Simon & Schuster isn't going to put some marketing budget behind it, but you're also going to be required to do appearances, use social media, have a platform, do readings, and get involved in different activities and events. For a lot of people, that sounds like fun. And for a lot of other people, that sounds like the worst possible thing you could ever hope to get involved in. The self-published author and the traditional author will do equal amounts of marketing. And you can even tell today, although we have a lot of self-published authors in the room, there are some traditional published authors here too. And if you ask them how much they've had to go out and promote and talk about their books in public and do presentations and get involved in things and keep their name in their book at top of mind, you'll find that it's just as much work no matter which side of that traditional or self-published world you're in. Myth number 7. Self-publishing is free. Sort of, maybe. It is possible to use a self-publishing service online. Again, I'll use Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, or maybe Ingram Spark as examples, where you can sign up for a free account. If you're capable of using certain design programs, basic programs, nothing special, you can design your own cover. You can typeset your own interior. You can combine these files and upload them, and then order a printed copy. So yeah, it's not free, and your printed copy might cost about $3. So that's pretty darn close to free. But there are so many things in the self-publishing world that you're going to need to do, because if that's all you ever invest in your book financially, that's probably the only copy that's ever going to be printed and sold. There are certain levels of professionalism that's expected in every book. Number 1, the book cover, the cover design. Perhaps you're an excellent graphic artist or designer, and you have the ability to create an amazing piece of artwork for the cover of your book. But most people aren't that good. And you really do want to find a cover designer and cover artist who has some experience creating book covers. That doesn't have to be very expensive, but there would be a cost involved in that. You also want to have a cover that's designed so it fits into the genre that you're trying to sell. And you'll probably see that with a few books here, where you kind of look at the book cover and you can't really tell, okay, is this fiction? Is this nonfiction? Is this romance? Is it mystery? And you're not quite sure. Well, if you're putting that kind of question into the minds of the public when you produce a book, you're going to have trouble marketing that book. Other places you're going to find you're going to need actually invest money is in things like advertising or promotion. Sometimes those dollars can be small, but they're dollars nonetheless. You may want to purchase your own ISBN, your International Standard Book Number. Some of the publisher services will provide it for free, but it is probably a better idea to own your own. And that, again, is going to run, could run $100 to $150 per ISBN that you might need. And then the interior of the book itself. There is a proper way to set up a legal page, and there's a proper order for things like dedications and acknowledgments and prefaces and those things that go in a book. And if you don't have someone who knows how that all goes together, the market is going to be able to tell, the consumer will be able to tell. So there are things you will want to invest in. And I've already talked about editing and having a good copy editor, someone with experience copy editing books for grammar, spelling, and consistency is extremely important. Myth number 7. Real publishers will never talk to you if you self-publish. There's some truth in that, but not a lot. Part of the narrative is that if you self-publish a book, and it's put another part of the problem in publishing. I often talk about a horror author from England who I met years ago. Her name was Lexi Rebellion. And she writes genre horror, lots of vampire stuff, lots of blood and guts. Really, fun author. When she started out, she started with an ebook, and she posted it to Kindle. And I think the first month sold 3, and her second month maybe sold 5, and the next month sold 3 or 4 more. And she went to an agent and said, I'd really like to get this traditionally published into a book and get a contract. And they said, well, look, we can tell just by looking at your sales. There is no market for this book. If you're selling 3 books a month, you're not going to find a publisher. So she went home and she marketed the heck out of it. And promoted it, and promoted it, and promoted it. And the fact that she was a talented writer didn't hurt either. But the thing caught on. Suddenly she was selling 50 copies a month, then 200 a month, and then she was averaging between 5,000 and 10,000 copies an ebook each month. And she went back to that agent and she said, look, I think I've proven people want this book. We've sold a lot of copies. And the agent looked at the sales numbers and said, yeah, but now you've burned out your market. Who's going to buy it now? Everybody who ever wanted one's got it. And that's part of that quandary, that part of that dilemma, is that if you self-publish your book, you're now attached to that sales history. There's something called book scan, where if you walk into an agent's office with a self-published book and say, they self-published this, I'd like to have it traditionally done. The first thing they're going to do is check sales on book scan. And if you don't have very many, well, that means it is an interest, it's not viable market for it. And if you sold a lot, then well, the market's kind of burned out. So how do you get around this? Well, I can tell you a number of different examples of self-published authors who've had success. One of them I talk about often, is Sean Fay Wolf. Sean is a member of the ARIA. He's not here today, though. He started out as a teenager writing fan fiction for Minecraft. If you know what Minecraft is, it's a game. And he self-published a book, sold it around his high school, sold it around other high schools, sold it around the neighborhood. And as a member of the association, he came with us to the New England Independent Booksellers Association conference and ran into a representative from Scholastic Books who saw his self-published book and said, there is a real market right now. Publishers are looking for good fan fiction in Minecraft. Let me give you someone's name. And he sent out a query to that particular agent. The agent bought the book, or at least signed a contract with him, and sold that book to HarperCollins. And the final contract in Sean's project, he got a 3-book deal with HarperCollins that paid for at least a car and the rest of his college education. And then they sent him to London for Comic-Con, Dubai, and San Diego to help promote the series. And it had nothing to do with the fact that he self-published. He would not have had any success if he had not self-published. But what it came down to is that he had written a book in a genre that people wanted to buy. It was all the marketing. The publisher said, we're looking for this is what we need. He had the book. He had the manuscript. And that's what won the day. So if you're self-published or you're not self-published, it doesn't mean that much anymore. There was a time when maybe that was a big stigma among the public, but now the publishing industry knows there are good writers who are working their craft, who have marketable, promotable books, and they will be looking for them. We just have to know how to approach them and have a product that they're interested in. Myth number 8. My book will make a great movie. Probably not. The craft of writing screenplays, the craft of writing film for film. And there's a reason why there are 9 Star Wars movies and spin-offs and TV shows and cartoons. Just like the book industry, the film industry is looking for what's already worked. They can't invest millions into a high-budget production if they don't have some guarantee that it's going to pay back their investors. There's certainly opportunities with small books. for local productions, local plays, local filmmakers. The indie film market does a lot of stuff like that, and it's a great place to work with. But writing a screenplay from not based on a novel or based on your work is a project unto itself. So if that's your goal, is to get a movie made on out of your book, it is a very difficult and a very different kind of process than you might be expecting. Myth number 9, self-publishing is easy. Anybody can do it. Well, I can tell you that anybody can certainly go online, create files, and upload them, and have something called a book with covers and pages in it. But any kind of quality work does take time and investment. And if you're not going to invest financially, you at least have to invest in time. And sometimes it's the time that's a more difficult investment than the finances. When you know how many times you need to revise, or where you need to go for editing, or how you need to get your cover redesigned. So can anybody do it? I guess technically yes. But watch as you walk the room today and you see the different authors who have created works. Think about the investment, not necessarily of finances or money, but the investment of time that they put into each of these books to get the cover the way they wanted it, to get the marketing, the editorial, the content, the design, all those things exactly the way they wanted to get them. So in a sense, it is easy. Anybody can do it, but not everyone is going to be able to do it well. And myth number 10, you can't make money self-publishing. Going back to a comment I made a few minutes ago about having expectations. Are you getting involved in self-publishing so you can make money? Is that part of the goal? If it is, then how you set up your approach is going to be very different than someone that says, I don't care about the financial parts of this, I just want to get my book out there. And those are two different paths. If you're smart and you start at the beginning and say, okay, I know what I want to write. I know how much I want to invest, and I want to learn about how the book industry, how people respond, how to find readers and how to find book buyers, then yes, you can be financially successful. If you think about just a straight old ebook that maybe you'll upload to Kindle, let's say it's $10. Well, Kindle will pay you 70% royalties for your book. So if you've uploaded a $10 book and you get 70% back, every ebook that you sell, you make $7. They'll send you a direct deposit every month. So all you have to do is figure out is how to sell those ebooks, is to learn the market and learn where to sell them. You sell 10 at $70, sell 100,000 at $7,000. It's straight math. So can you make money self-publishing? Yes, absolutely. Same with paperbacks. There's a reason why there are 135 authors here tonight. They know they've got some interesting things and they need to get their name and their books out into the public view. And if they manage their costs, they manage their budget. If they're thinking about their budget at the same time they're thinking about their writing. Because in every way, shape, or form, self-publishing is very much like running your own little business. There are expenses to worry about, there's revenue to worry about, there's taxes to worry about, there's all those issues come up. And too many authors get into it wanting to make, at least break even or make some kind of little profit at it without ever looking at any of those issues. They just kind of walk in the door and say, okay, now I've got my book, so I guess magically the money is just going to rain from the sky. And I think that if more authors planned ahead a little bit, and that's really what a lot of this presentation has really been about, is kind of learning the business, learning how the pieces fit together, how bookstores fit in with libraries and fit in with book shows and fit in with Amazon and fit in with Barnes & Noble and all these other issues and how they connect. because it can be a very complicated issue, but it can be a lot of fun. A lot of people have criticized me and my presentations in the past because I'm too negative. It's like, oh, well, why don't you just, you should get up there at the microphone and tell everybody how much fun it is, and how much they're going to enjoy it, and boy, it's going to be great. And I said, I could do that, and I don't mind doing that because I have a blast doing this stuff. But I can tell you that the people who are dissatisfied when they do this are those that didn't plan ahead, and that those who made assumptions, who were incorrect, or those who believed some of these myths and didn't get out of it what they hoped to get out of it. So I'm going to end there and open it up to questions. So I assume everybody here has some books? Yes?
Steve, is developmental editing the same as content editing?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Developmental editing and content editing are close to the same. When you're picking an editor, you want to be very clear that they explain to you what they will do when you hire them. Because there are a lot of words and phrases that get tossed around that are similar.
My question, how do you find an editor?
How do you find an editor?
Yes.
My suggestion is to work through with a lot of the writing groups. You can just go online and Google it, but that's probably a poor way to do that. Today here you've got, in the back, New England Horror Writers, Independent Publishers of New England, the Association, all these organizations, What's Your Writers Club. These organizations have those connections to good writers. And if you're doing children's books, good illustrators. And so that would be a perfect place to start.
What's more important, marketing or content?
So what's more important, marketing or content? It's like a trick question. Well, it comes down to your expectations. One without the other might not meet what you hope to get out of it. For that author who just wants to get out there and make their family and friends happy, content is all you got to worry about. Just write a great book. On the other hand, if you're actually expecting to sell it, then you better have some marketing behind it. Because otherwise your hope is that people are just going to magically discover it. And that's a rare thing.
What are the advantages of owning your own ISBN as opposed to taking one assigned to you by, for example?
It's always a good idea. Another question is about ISBN. The ISBN is the International Standard Book Number. And every book in the United States has one. So if you open up to a legal page, you'll see ISBN 978- something. Your ISBN is unique to the publisher in that book. So if you are the publisher and that is your book, because you're self-publishing, you should own your own ISBN. In the major database of ISBNs, which is maintained by an organization called Bowker, the ownership of that ISBN is whoever bought it. So if you do your book through, let's say, Amazon, the Amazon KDP platform, and you use their ISBN, your book will be ever shown as that edition is owned by Amazon. So if that's the only book you're ever going to do, and this is it, that was your one, a lot of people like to do just one book. They have one thing they want to get out there. That's fine. There's probably very little harm in using the KDP, the free ISBN. On the other hand, if your goal is to be a long-term writer, you're going to do multiple books, you really like it to take off, you really like it to be your own little enterprise, then you're going to want to own your own ISBN.
They used to have copyrights. Is it important to have a copyright?
Copyright?
Yeah.
You should definitely, absolutely copyright your work. In the United States, and I'm neither an attorney nor do I play one on television, but under U.S. law, if you are ignoring me right now and writing a poem instead, under U.S. law, that work is copyrighted to you because you're the person who originally wrote it. However, if something were to happen, if you end up getting, having to go to court, having to go through some different levels of litigation over someone stealing the work or reprinting the work without your permission, having that copyright certificate issued by the government is not a bad thing to have. It's kind of like an insurance policy, I guess, in some ways. It's not expensive to get. So you're talking, between $35 and $55, depending on what you have. And you're much better off getting one, especially since it's cheap, than risking. If you want some great information about copyright, I'll send you to Jim Dyer's table here at the back. Jim publishes for Fenham Publishing. Jim won a copyright case. And it's a great story about his grandfather, who wrote, named C.M. Eddy, who wrote as Harry Houdini's ghostwriter. And Jim owns the copyright certificates to all that work, and then found someone else reprinting it. And got to court and won, and got his legal fees back, and got a very nice check on top of that from the judge. But it's rare, but it happens.
As an editor who also writes, am I better keeping those two services, those two identities separate? As far as marketing myself, my services.
I would think so. As an editor who writes, you mean, as keeping those two separate? I would think it would be. I would think so. Yeah. Even the best editors I know who write need an editor. It's strange to say that. I tend to edit a lot of children's books. I don't do manuscripts beyond maybe 10 to 15,000 words because I don't have the attention span for lack of better explanation, or I'm very slow. But even the best writers I know and the best editors I know need editors, because we all have our own particular quirks in our writing that would benefit from having a professional clean it up a little bit.
Second set of eyes.
That second set of eyes, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm going to ask a question that I thought he was asking, which is that if you are both an editor and a writer, from a professional standpoint, is it good to have those two identities separated?
I don't know.
Like a pen name?
My sense is yes, because I think that someone might look at you as a writer and say, oh, they're just an editor, not a real writer, and you're a writer, not a real editor. So I could see the benefit of keeping those separate, but I'd have to think about that a little.
Fair enough.
So anything else? Any other topics? Folks we got about 5 minutes. But if not, then I'll be at my table, which is right in the middle of the room. Stillwater River Publications, Stillwater Books. Feel free to drop by anytime, say hello, check out what we've got, what we've done. And certainly ask all these same questions to the folks in the room. There's one thing I can tell you that almost everyone here does, is they love to talk about their books and the process. They're all very proud of their work, and there's a lot of great stuff out there to look at. So I thank you very much. Thank you for sharing some time with me today, and enjoy the show.